is 1775. The month is May. Recently, shots were fired in Lexington and Concord. We had British troops firing on colonists and colonists firing on British troops. How can that be? We're supposed to be all one nation. We're all British subjects, and yet now we're firing at each other. So you're very confused. You don't really understand what's been going on, and you heard that there was going to be a debate in Boston, so you've gathered here on Boston Common today, and you are going to listen to two different points of view. And there are always two sides to every story, whether it's back in 1775 and it's the American Revolution, or it's out on the playground when you're listening to your friends. You listen to both sides, because we always have two sides to every story, and that's a good life lesson. So we have to now take ourselves back to that year, 1775. I'm going to ask you to forget what you know about history. We know that we won the war and we became an independent country, and we're happy about that. But if you really are in 1775, you know nothing about that yet. Right now, what you need to know is that you are British subjects, you are English, and your ruler is King George III. Now, the points today are going to argue, should we get rid of the king and become our own country, or should we stay loyal to our country? Do we want to go to war, or do we want to be peaceful? The hardest thing for you is to forget what you already know, okay? So, and that's a big responsibility, and we'll talk more about that when it comes time to vote, because at the end of the performance, you're going to have an opportunity to vote. You're not voting for whoever the eventual winner is. What you're voting for is which side made the best case. Whose arguments were stronger, okay? And voting, we'll talk about later. Did I forget anything, moderator?
Not that I know of.
Okay, I think we covered everything. At this point, I'm going to turn the debate over to our moderator for today, Sage Matska.
Also known as Dr. Joseph Warren. Welcome to the Great Debate. Before we start, there are some rules that have to be followed. Rule number 1. All people must be recognized by me, the moderator, before speaking. Rule number 2. Speaking out of turn is not allowed. If you do so, you will receive a warning. Rule number 3. If you receive 2 warnings, you'll be escorted to jail by the bailiffs. Rule number 4. At the end of the debate, you will get to vote. Of course, if you are in jail, you lose the privilege of voting. Now at this time, I would like to recognize our patriot debaters. Thomas Pawlowski.
Also known as Paul Revere.
Roy McGurk.
Also known as Joan Hancock.
Sarah Ethier.
Also known as Mistress Abigail Adams.
Olivia Chow.
Also known as John Adams.
And Katie Dorr.
Also known as Sam Adams.
And for lawyers, we have McKenna Blake.
Also known as William Franklin.
Kayla McLaren.
Also known as Major Mitchell.
Louise Camerman.
Also known as Sir Henry Clinton.
Drew Netter.
Also known as Captain Hall.
Ashley Holt.
Also known as Miss Hannah Sewell.
And Brooke Silver.
Also known as Governor Hutchinson.
And for bailiffs, we have Taylor Walker and Michael Wilkes. And our camera people in the back, we have Jack Marshall, Jim Gamache, Ian Becker, and Ethan Graham. He's not here. And for interviewers, we have Jay LeBlanc, Mistress Miller, Aiden Washington, and Kevin Aiden. Now at this time, the bailiff will flip a coin to decide who will go first. Patriots,
Tails.
and loyalists with heads.
Heads.
Loyalists will go first. Let the great debate begin.
Wait! Mr. Moderator, please excuse my late arrival. The spring rains have made the roads to Virginia muddy and the travel difficult.
Apology accepted. And this is Tara Leon.
Also known as Patrick Henry.
Now let the great debate begin. Our first topic of debate is salutary neglect and the proclamation of 1763. Loyalists, Major Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good citizens, salutary neglect, helpful neglect was a gift to the colonies. For many years, good King George has not enforced the Navigation Acts, allowing the colonies to trade freely with other countries and have not made them pay the tax as a good British subjects. We should have known this wouldn't last forever. When England stopped salutary neglect, that is when the tension began. England is now in debt for war fought right here in the colonies. British soldiers were sent here to protect us from from attacks by the French and Indians. You like having protection when it was free? Now it's the time to pay our fair share!
Here! Here!
Patriots. John Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Salutary neglect, helpful neglect, was a good thing for we colonists. And on this point, Major Mitchell and I agree. But how fair are these navigation acts to begin with? Why must we trade only with England? We enjoyed being able to make our own trade agreements with other countries. It certainly helped our economy here in the colonies. And is it fair to ask us to pay for a war that did not just benefit us, but also England? We colonists fought side by side with the British regulars and helped win that war. Here! Here!
Major Mitchell, do you wish to rebut?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. The proclamation of 1763 was a good thing. Not moving west of the Appalachian Mountains is good for all of us, because good King George is making sure we are safe from the Indian attacks. He can't send enough troops here to guarantee our safety. If we keep forcing those Indians from their lands, we'll only cause more conflict.
Here! Here!
John Adams, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. The proclamation of 1763 has changed everything. After helping England fight the French and Indian War, King George says we can't move west the Appalachian Mountains. This was one of the reasons we fought. We aren't allowed to move freely now. There is rich soil for farming across those mountains in the Ohio Valley. It is not fair to restrict us this way. Give us back salutary neglect and let us move freely in our own country. Here! Here!
Our next topic of debate is the Boston Massacre. Patriots. Mistress Abigail Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The events of March 5th, 1770, now known as the Boston Massacre, were tragic. 5 people lost their lives, the most precious gift of all. British soldiers shot into a crowd of innocent colonists without being ordered to by their commanding officer. This all began because one of those soldiers hit an unarmed boy with the butt of his musket. An innocent boy!
Here! Here! Down with the kid!
Warning what? Loyalists? Governor Hutchinson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Massacre, indeed. A massacre's definition is to kill many, slaughter in large numbers. In the Boston tragedy, it is not due to call it a massacre. 5 died. It's a tragedy, even 1 death. However, the death of 5 is not a massacre. And fellow citizens, pay not attention to the engraving of Mr. Revere that appeared in the newspaper. It was pure propaganda meant to mislead you into opposition of our dear king. He has positioned the combatants incorrectly in his engraving. Let me inform you of the 2 course of events. First, let me remind you, none of this would have happened if the rebels hadn't started to harass Private White as he stood guard. This was clearly an act of self-defense. In Mr. Revere's engraving, it shows the officer in charge leading his soldiers into attack when in fact he was commanding them to stop firing. Patriots, loyalists, Londonderry all. For the rebels' own, John Adams defended the British soldiers when they went to trial, and they were found not guilty. And why would Adams, a patriot, defend these men? Why? I'll tell you why. Because he knew they were in the right. We need to obey the laws and not let mob violence rule.
Here! Here! Long live the king!
Warning what?
Thank you. It was a massacre. 5 lives lost. Even 1 life is too many. If those soldiers felt threatened, they could have fired a warning shot instead of firing into a crowd of unarmed people.
Here! Here!
Governor Hutchinson, you may speak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, aimed snowballs could cause serious injury, especially when filled with sharp oyster shells and pieces of ice. That is what soldiers were bombarded with. On the night of the tragedy, the moon was in such a position that the colonists were on the dark side of the street. How were the soldiers to know that the clubs being raised were not in fact guns?
Here! Here!
Mistress Abigail Adams, do you wish to rebut?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Snowballs and sticks don't kill, guns do!
Here! Here!
We simply must not let mob violence rule our streets. Those soldiers were clearly defending themselves when attacked. Also, keep in mind, John Adams defended the British soldiers and they were found innocent.
Here! Here!
Our next discussion brings us to taxes. Loyalists, William Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Taxes are truly fair and necessary. Our dear king and our parliament sent troops here to the colonies to assist and protect us during the French and Indian War. Without their support, we have not been victorious. War is expensive and England is now in debt for a war fought here. We must pay our fair share. Citizens in England were taxed before us and are paying 5 times more tax dollars than we are. They even have to pay tax for glass on their windows. The amount we are asked to pay is a small price for what we receive. And what do you rebels do? Make effigies and hang them from trees, even after our kind king repealed all but the tax on tea.
Here! Here! Patriots, Samuel Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. When the French and Indian War ended, the king began taxing the colonies unfairly. He has taxed our sugar, our paper, and our tea. These taxes are intolerable because we have no say in how the tax money is spent. I say no taxation without representation. Who's with me?
Here! Here! William Franklin, you may speak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. How will representation work? It's too far to travel back and forth to England for representation. The king has always been good to us, continue to be if we remain loyal and pay our fair share.
Here! Here!
No taxation without representation.
Warning 1.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There is a difference between taxing the colonies and taxing people in England. Representation. They have it, we don't. We even sent Ben Franklin, your father, over to England to make a polite and peaceful request for representation, and he was refused.
Here! Here! Our next discussion brings us to the Boston Tea Party. Patriots, Patrick Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Taxing our tea is not fair. As a result of this unfair tax, patriotic citizens in the protest did empty into the Boston Harbor. But let's look at the facts. The men did not damage anything but the tea. They wrote the logs to the tea chest, replaced them the next day. They even swept the deck when they were through. Some of the ship's crew helped at the tea dumping.
Here! Here! Loyalist, Captain Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On December 16, 1773, colonists dressed as Native Americans boarded my ship, the Dartmouth, and dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston Harbor. These rebels are cowards. If they won't show their faces, they must be ashamed of their actions.
Here! Here! Patrick Henry, do you have any rebuttal?
Yes, Mr. Moderator. We know British tea costs less. We'd rather pay more for smuggled tea than pay for the dreaded tea tax. We stick by our principles. No taxation without representation.
Here! Here!
Rally Mohawks! Bring out your asses! Tell King George we'll pay no taxes!
Rally Mohawks! Put down your asses! Tell King George we'll pay those taxes! Warning 1, all of you. Another outburst like that and you'll all be sentenced to jail. Now let's continue this like civilized people. Thank you. Captain Hall, you may speak.
Thank you, kind sir. You're paying more for smuggled tea than you could pay less for good British tea without a tax. The law was broken when private property was destroyed. Some of those rebels even tried to steal some of the tea.
Here! Here!
Money bags, go home!
Warning 1. Patrick Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Parliament and the King have closed Boston Harbor and taken away our right to govern ourselves. This is a harsh act and intolerable. Say goodbye to liberty. I know not what course others might take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death!
Here! Here!
I'll give you death!
You're all a bunch of rebels.
Warning 1. Warning 2. Bailiffs, take him away. Thank you, bailiffs. Captain Hall, do you have any rebuttal?
Yes, I do. Thank you. All of Boston now suffers for the action of a few. The closing of Boston Harbor is a hardship for many of us. But don't blame the king. Let's lay the blame where it belongs at the feet of those rebels who broke the law.
Here! Here! Our next discussion brings us to the quartering house. Loyalists, Sir Henry Clinton.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. British soldiers have come here all the way from England to protect us. They bring no shelter. They have their guns and uniforms, but not a roof over their heads. The least we can do is give them a warm bed to sleep in and a good meal. I mean, really, they're here to protect us. It's the least we can do. Soldiers need to be fed well and a place to sleep so they may rest.
Here! Here! Patriots, John Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We have suffered from the burden of unfair taxes. We've lost our right to govern ourselves. They've closed Boston Harbor, causing economic hardships, and now they tell us to quarter their soldiers? How fair is this? We struggle to feed our own families. How are we supposed to support soldiers too?
Here! Here!
I repeat, they're here to protect us.
Here! Here!
We didn't ask for their protection. We can protect ourselves.
Here! Here!
If you don't need your protection, go home.
Warning 2. Bailiffs, take him away. Our last topic of debate is the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Patriots, Mr. Revere.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Recently, British troops marched on our villages in Lexington and Concord. How can we support a government that fires at their own people? Even though we don't know who fired first, I know what happened at the Boston Massacre, and I don't doubt some bloody bat got nervous and fired. They taxed us, taking away our rights to govern ourselves, and now they're shooting at us. In Concord, we fired on British troops when we saw smoke rising from our village. We thought the town was being burnt down.
Here! Here!
Loyalists, Mistress Hannah Sewell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. No one knows who fired the first shot on Lexington Green, but the militia should not have assembled there. It was a clear message to our troops that they wanted to fight. The soldiers were there to search for 2 traitors, John Hancock and Sam Adams, and for hidden weapons that could be used against them. Yes, there was smoke rising in Concord, but the British regulars weren't burning down the village, just the Liberty Pole, a piece of wood, and a symbol against the king. Check your facts before you act. Lives could have been saved.
Here! Here!
Mr. Revere, do you wish to rebut?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Maybe you didn't burn down the village, but you burned down our Liberty Pole. It's a symbol of our freedom. It's as if you took our freedom from us.
Here! Here!
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. People who break the law lose their rights to liberty.
Here! Here!
That concludes our topics of debate. You will now hear a summary from both sides of the story. Patriots, Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good citizens, you have heard 2 different points of view today, and now you are being asked to decide to continue to live by the king's unfair rules or fight for freedom. Listen while I review the facts, and you will realize that you should side with we Whigs and fight for independence. Salutary neglect was good for we colonists. It helped our economy. The king left us alone for many years. Why did he stop? We fought alongside British troops during the French and Indian War, hoping to be able to travel further west at the conclusion. But the proclamation of 1763 prohibits us from moving west of the Appalachian Mountains. What was the point of our fighting? The Boston Massacre was truly a massacre. 5 lives lost. How can we feel safe when British soldiers opened fire upon us? At the Boston Tea Party, fellow patriots, just as Indians, did board a ship with them tea. However, they damaged nothing else and were only protesting an unfair tax. We believe there should be no taxation without representation. We have no say in how our money is spent. Is it used to benefit us? It could be being spent on things we do not agree with. Quartering soldiers at our expense is harsh. We can barely afford to support our own families. Why should we support British troops as well? Blasterbacks fired upon our militias at Lexington and Concord. They're supposed to be our protectors, not our enemies, and yet they fire upon us. An important decision awaits us. Shall we remain meek lambs forced to follow unfair rules, or shall we demand our rights? It is time to separate from England. We may lose a king, but think of what we will gain. Liberty!
Here! Here!
Loyalists, Governor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Fellow citizens, you have heard many arguments today and now are being asked to make a choice. Listen while I summarize the excellent points made by my fellow loyalist debaters, and you will see the choice is clear. We must stay true to our king and our country. Salutary neglect, helpful neglect, has been around for a long time, and we've benefited from this. We should have known it wouldn't be around forever. The proclamation of 1763 was made to keep us safe from hostile attacks made by Native Americans. Parliament and our king were only looking out for our welfare when asking us to stay west of the Appalachian Mountains. What is now being called the Boston Massacre was certainly a tragedy. Any loss of life is, but it was clearly not a massacre. Those poor soldiers were only defending themselves from attack. And remember, John Adams, a patriot, defended those soldiers, and they were found innocent. Why did he do this? I'll tell you why. Because he knew those soldiers acted in self-defense. Dumping tea into the Boston harbor was a criminal act. When the Sons of Liberty did this, they broke the law destroying private property. We must remain law-abiding citizens, or else we will all suffer. Parliament and our king have imposed a few taxes on items we purchase, but they have provided us with both economic support and military safety. This is a small price to pay for what we receive. Are we not British subjects? Should we not support our country? Representation will not be practical. It takes too long to get messages back and forth to England across the expansive ocean. And our king has always taken good care of us, and he will continue to if we let him. The quartering of soldiers is necessary. We need to have them in good shape so they may continue doing their job of protecting us. Unfortunately, shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. But do not blame the British regulars. They were only doing their job. When the peace is threatened, they must keep orders. And knowing how well trained and disciplined they are, I do not believe they would have fired first. Good people, let's remember, we are all British subjects. As such, we enjoy the benefits of being part of the world's most powerful country. After listening to the points made today, the choice is clear. Remain loyal, and we will continue to thrive and live in peace under the protection and support of our beloved king. I know you will make the right choice.
Here! Here! Before we vote, do we have any questions? Mr. Washington.
I have a family back in England. He sides with the Patriots. Will I ever get to see him again?
He says he has a family back in England. If he sides with the Patriots, will we ever be able to see them again? Patriots? Mistress Abigail Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, unfortunately not, but some things are worth the sacrifice. Liberty is worth the sacrifice.
Here! Here! Loyalist? Lady Mitchell.
No, you will never be able to see your family, for if you step foot in England, you will be hanged as a traitor. So stay loyal to your country, and you will not have to worry about seeing your family.
Here! Here! You, in the back.
I'm a Quaker and a pacifist. Is there no way to settle this peacefully?
He said he's a Quaker and a pacifist. Is there no way to settle this peacefully? Loyalist? Mistress Hannah Sewell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Of course we can settle this peacefully. We just have to pay the small tax and it will all end up just fine. We will continue to enjoy the protection of our great British Empire.
Here! Here! Patriots? John Adams.
Of course we can settle this peacefully. Just give us the representation we asked for and we can avoid war.
Here! Here! Anyone else?
Audience, this is your chance to ask them some questions, put them on the spot, test their knowledge of the Revolution. This is their second day of performance, and they've had to field a lot of questions, and they have done a great job. So if you have a desire to ask something, now is your chance.
If I side with the Patriots, will I be free of taxes forever?
She said if she sides with the Patriots, will she be free of taxes forever? Patriots? Patriots? William Franklin.
No, you'll still be paid taxes because they will also be in debt if they get no money.
Anyone else? President Clinton.
Well, even if you do break off and form your own country, taxes are what's going to get the economic level up and up so that the government can buy stuff and get your military safety.
Matthew.
What's the difference between being in the audience and being in jail? You can't talk in either one.
What's the difference between being an audience and being in jail? Well, for me, it means that they won't get to vote. Yeah. Anyone else who wants to add to that? Patriots? Loyalists? Major Mitchell?
Well, they'll have you guys to go in a little bit, and they have to stay there for a penalty, and they don't get to vote.
I think the voting is the big thing,
Yeah.
Matt. I think that once they're in jail, they lose that right to be able to vote.
Maybe the Bills could.
The audience can still talk and get warnings, though.
Oh, yes, we had several people that were put in jail yesterday, including a teacher. It happens, which just shows how much they inspired a reaction from the audience. So fourth graders, you probably have a lot of things going on in your mind, but again, you'll be studying this next year.
If we side with the Patriots and move west, would we be attacked by the Indians?
Patriots? Professor Henry?
It's possible.
Anyone else want
Well,
to add?
I think loyalists want to rebut that.
Governor Henderson?
It's very well going to be possible Because how would you like it if people were trying to take your home away from you?
I saw someone raise their hand up in the back.
What are they trying to protect us from across the Appalachian Mountains?
Captain Hall.
Hostile Indian attacks. We don't want our own troops getting hurt.
Major Mitchell.
King George doesn't want any more people hurt because we just fought a war and we're in debt, and he doesn't want anybody to get killed because those are his like soldiers and stuff, and he doesn't want any more Indian attacks, so he just wants to leave them alone.
I'll ask that too. Well, King George considers himself a father to all over the colonists, so I guess he doesn't want any danger to come upon his children.
He did feel fondly towards his people, didn't he?
Anyone else? Parents can ask questions too.
Reese, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there might be some bears or other wild creatures and things that might be out there if you cross the Appalachian Mountains. If you're in the colonies, you have protection. But once you cross the Appalachian Mountains, you have to worry about Indians attacking you and bears or wolves.
It's very true. We don't really know what's beyond the Appalachian Mountains in 1775, do we? That's about as far as we've gone. We wouldn't worry about that today. We know what's out there, but back then, if the king isn't able to send any troops over there to protect us, then we're kind of on our own. And it's not just hostile attacks from the Indians, it's also wild animals that we have to protect ourselves from.
There's a warning one back there, you two, you think. I think. Wait, Matthew.
If I were to join the Loyalists, would I be safer than joining the Patriots?
Good question.
Midge Mitchell.
Yes, because there would be no more war. There would just be peace.
Surgeon Clinton.
Well, depends on where you live. So in the colonies at that time, you probably want to side with the Patriots because Patriots would tar and feather you if you were a loyalist. But if you were back in England, then you wouldn't really have to worry about that.
That whole tar and feather thing, does somebody want to kind of explain? I think we should have a patriot explain because they're the ones that are guilty of doing it, so.
Mr. Veer.
Patriots tar and feathered people like tax collectors because they don't want to pay any taxes, and there was a protest, and they also ran the tax collectors out of town and burned down their houses. And when you try to take off the tar that they put on, their skin gets ripped off.
22 back there.
Who has a 1 and 2?
Laura.
I didn't say anything.
You keep on whispering.
All right, Bailiff.
Oh, you're going to
They just love doing their job.
Naomi, front.
If I side with the loyalists, will I have to pay more taxes?
Mitchell.
Well, it's kind of in the middle. Like, you don't have to pay a lot of taxes. The king repealed all the taxes.
Repealed everything but the.
But the tax on tea, and that's like not even a lot. Like, it's very little, and smuggled tea costs more, and even with the added tax, it costs less. So you would be paying less taxes.
Governor Hutchinson.
Well, if you stayed in England and if you lived in England, you would pay 5 times more taxes, but you would have representation. You would know where they'd be going to.
Mr. Veer.
in England, as the book said, they pay 5 times more, but they also have to pay taxes on windows. And in the colonies, you pay, well, you don't have to pay tax on windows.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, paying a tax on windows.
Glass for your window.
Glass for your windows, yeah.
Didn't people like start breaking up their windows because of that?
Yeah, some people just didn't want to pay the tax on the glass, so they just didn't have glass in the windows. They would just close them up. I often wonder, if we still had that tax today, what kind of a protest we would have. I have 23 windows. That could get a little expensive.
Just somewhere down there.
What is smuggle tea?
Oh, smuggle tea.
That's a
I
good
think the
question.
tea drink. Oh, you did, Mr. Washington.
Well, it's when the Patriots would steal tea and then sell it to people secretly so that they wouldn't be sent to jail or punished.
Yeah, it was called smuggled because it was brought in, it was illegal. It wasn't the British tea that was being sold. They would bring that tea in illegally and then sell it. If they got caught, the bailiffs would really have a field day bringing people to jail.
The other Matthew. You.
Why are people wearing pink in the 1700s?
Well, let's just say, well, purple was common color too, so was green.
Yeah, we did the best we could with our costumes. We just, grabbed whatever we had that might look a little, authentic, but we know that sometimes, our colors today, I told them they could wear, but what they wanted, they just couldn't wear anything neon. And are you talking about this vest right here?
Well, Senator Clinton is rich. I mean, he's a...
This was originally red and it's faded. So that's the color you get over time. These vests here, my husband is a Revolutionary War reenactor, and these were vests that he would have worn. So these are very authentic, as is this one here. And some of your hats, I just kind of went in his closet and took all the stuff. But this one he's had for a long time, and as you wash it and wear it, the red does fade. So it is kind of a nice shade of, very red inside though.
Me?
Yeah.
If I side with the Patriots, will I lose all the things that I've gotten from England?
I think the Patriots can have that. Mr. O'Leary?
Yeah, you could bring your stuff. You wouldn't lose it because you could just bring it over on a boat.
Well, yeah, but
What did they get?
yeah, if you side with the Patriots, are you going to be able to ever go back to England? No.
Patrick Henry.
You lose representation because we're going over to the colonies, and they don't have representation
They
in the
don't
colonies.
have. Well, after the war, some of the people that still wanted to stay loyalists, what did they end up doing? What did they end up doing, Reese?
They went to Nova Scotia.
Yeah, a lot of them went to Nova Scotia. Some went back to England. Some just said, okay, this is the way it is. I'll stay here in the colonies and I won't have a king anymore. And then, some did go up to Nova Scotia, which is in Canada. True?
And Nova Scotia was also a little bit a part of England.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Any more?
Okay.
Rebecca?
Last one. Go ahead.
Why would the king send over troops to in the French and Indian War? Why would the king send over troops to help win the war against them when the king didn't allow them to move west past the Appalachian Mountains?
That's a good question.
Henry Clinton?
Well, England was making lots of money off the colonies because of all the trapping, and then the French were like, oh no, we can't come in here because the colonists wanted to go over to French lands to farm. The French didn't like it, so the French attacked the British and started a war. And everyone thought that they would move west at the end, also really mad at both sides because they were fighting on their land. And so King George made the proclamation of 1763 to protect the colonists from attacks. Thank you. There was the warning one back there, and Ryan kept on talking. So
Boom.
That's what I was
He was talking too.
Settle down.
I saw you all talking.
They were telling me to raise my hand and
I saw like that.
I think time-wise, I know we have pictures today, so we're going to have to kind of wrap it up. But you had some really great questions, and I think we could probably sit here and answer questions for quite a while. Is it one more burning question? It's up to the moderator because she's in charge.
Well, I know you've been raising your hand for a while.
I was trying to tell you Ryan was calling.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. How about?
Well, wait a minute. She had the question.
I know.
She said one more question, so if you're going to allow it, let her go. Okay. No.
no, not Frida.
What is her name?
Naomi.
Naomi? No, I said
No.
back there.
Freedom, right there. Naomi has the question saved. I mean, you're
Yeah.
right.
Naomi.
If the loyalists wanted to stay, if the loyalists had paid 5 times more taxes, why would they stay?
Governor Henderson?
We say loyalists because we had representation and we know where the money was going. And we could choose where the money was going to.
Where they stayed loyal because we knew the king was going to protect us, and there was not going to be any more fighting, and we had representation, and we knew where the money was going.
Captain Hall, do you want to ask?
And yes, that money would go to the king because they were in debt in the war.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing with taxes. We were in debt from a war.
And that's why they gave out taxes.
Yeah. And it was back in England that they paid 5 times more tax. The colonies paid 5 times less than they did back in England. So the colonists actually were only asked to pay a little bit of tax, but they didn't like that either because they didn't have representation. All right, now we really are going to get on with the vote. Jay, we really have to get on with the vote.
Just keeps on laughing because they just all go to
They
jail.
keep on talking.
All right, guys, we're wrapping it up now, so I'm going to ask you to stay with me, okay? All right, so a lot of information out there today. And the first thing I want to say is that I really, they've done a really, really good job working to get this ready, and they practiced for a long time. A lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. Not everybody's up here as a debater, but some of these people that are in jail actually had to go out and about the school a couple weeks ago, interviewing people around the school. So they played a part in that, getting people kind of psyched about coming to watch the debate. And then we had signs being made and lots of practicing, and then the call-outs and the questions, and we've just worked really, really hard to get this together. And what's great for me is yesterday when we started doing this, I could just go and sit in this chair, and I didn't have to worry because they were ready, and they just took on the challenge. And they were fabulous. So let's show them our appreciation. Good job. And you as an audience, you were fabulous too. So let's show them. Now for the voting. Okay. So our inclination is to naturally vote for the winning side. And we know the Patriots eventually won. And they did a fabulous job. But the Loyalists did a fabulous job too. And I always, at this point, say I'm really glad that I don't have to vote. And I don't know what I would have done if I had lived back at that period of time, because the points that each side made were so good. I would have a very hard time deciding which way to go. But you don't get off the hook, because you do have to vote. You have to decide today which side you think made the best case. If you're going to vote for the Patriots, where are my pens, guys? Have those? All right. These are words that they used a couple of times during the debate, and I don't know if you picked up on it or not, but the Patriots at that period of time in history were sometimes called Whigs, and the Loyalists were called Tories. Somebody explain how we remember, now because I would get this confused, so I had to have a way to remember which was which. Moderator, you can either answer it or you can call on somebody. Maybe somebody over in jail. Bailiff? Oh, all right, bailiff, yeah.
Patriots, Whigs, winners is spelled with a W, so it's Whigs.
Yeah, so that's our little clue to remember. Whigs begins with a W. The Patriots, we won the revolution, so W, win. So that's just our way of remembering it. So that's just a little hint for you guys. So Whigs are the Patriots and Tories are the Loyalists. My bailiffs are going to come around with, you want to hold one of those up, guys? With one of these chips. Everybody gets one of those. And if you think that the Patriots made the best case to go to war, overthrow their government, get rid of their king, and fight for independence, then your token will go in here in the Patriot tin. If you think the Loyalists did a better job over here, convincing you that you should stay loyal to your king and country and stay at peace, then you're going to put your token in here. Now, little caution here. Voting is a right and a privilege, okay? And as you get older and you go to vote, it's going to be your job to listen to both sides of the story, like you did today, and make an informed decision. You're not going to vote for the Patriots because you happen to think they're a great football team, okay? And you're not going to vote for the Loyalists because your best friend's sitting over here, or you really like these nice, authentic little vests that they're wearing, okay? The costuming doesn't matter. That's not how we cast a vote, all right? So really think about the points that they made. Forget what you already know about history, okay? We know who won. If you think they made a good case to fight, you vote for them. If you think they made a good case for staying loyal to your king, you vote for this group, all right? And bailiffs will come around with the tokens, one for everybody, including parents. Yes. Oh, yeah. All right. Here is the big question of the day. If you're in jail, you lose the right to vote. What? Okay? Now, you know, because voting is a privilege. It's a right we have, it's a privilege that we have. So if you're breaking the law, then you're going to lose that right. But because we're so kind and generous, we allow the audience to decide whether or not the jailbirds over here get to vote. So the moderator will call for a
Raise your
vote.
hand if you oppose.
Well, that means you do not want them to be able to vote. Raise your hand.
The jailbirds will not be able to vote.
All right. This is a hard audience this year because they didn't get to vote yesterday either. Some years the audience is kind. They can vote, but this year, Rule followers. I like it. Okay. Bailiffs, go ahead out and pass out those chips. As moderator.
Well, being moderator, as you know, is giving out warnings and keeping the debaters in check. And then, of course, I can't, lean to one side and say Loyalists were right or Patriots were right, because I'm the moderator and I have to stay neutral. So if I favor the Loyalist side, well then I would favor the loyalist side, and the debate would get messed up.
So you have to stay neutral. She can't take an opinion. She can't voice an opinion one way or the other. I'm sure she has an opinion, but as moderator, she has to not show that at all. It's her job to stay neutral and not take sides. Now, as a citizen, she will get to vote, and now that the debating is over, she can cast her vote however she wants. So she no longer has to stay neutral. And Felix, are you ready? Yeah. All right, let the voting begin. All right, first one vote. We don't usually have to spend this long counting. It's pretty close. Sometimes we don't even have to count. Anytime the loyalists come even close, it really is a win for them because they do have the hardest position to take. They didn't win yesterday. The Patriots won both times yesterday. But they got a tie at our dress rehearsal.
And she voted for it.
And right now, we have a winner. We do.
Yeah, Patriots. Patriots.
Oh, you serious?
And the winner is?
Patriots.
Patriots!
All right. I don't usually announce the count because that doesn't really matter. But this time they only lost by 9 votes. So that's a victory for them, and a well-deserved victory for the Patriots as well. At this time, my moderator, my class is going to leave you with one last thing.